I guess you could call me a professional drifter. The term that I suppose is loosely used. My name is Alan Hynes from Ireland. I'm 28 years old and I've been drifting for quite a long time. So right now we're at my parents' place, I guess. It's a workshop. Over there is where we first put this car together, and that was 2011. I've had this car for over 10 years, the S14 behind me. Yeah, I'm very sentimental to this car and I've been very sentimental to being here. So yeah, it's been a journey for sure. This car should have been retired like 6 years ago, but just due to laziness, I guess, is the probably best, more accurate way of wording it. We've kind of just band-aided it and kept it going. For example, the dashboard in the car is the original dashboard. Up until very recently, the windows in the car were the original windows, which is kind of crazy to think that the car that's nearly 30 years old has the original parts of it, especially since it's been crashed quite a bit, to the point of where it was actually a write-off at one point. So originally it's a 96 Nissan 200SX imported from the UK. It's got an inline six-cylinder from a Toyota Supra 2JZ. Then we got a gearbox from a NASCAR, so it's a 4-speed dog box from G-Force. And in the rear of it then, it's got a sprint car differential, which is those like small stubby little dirt oval cars you see in America and Australia and stuff like that. So it's a hob job of like different manufacturers and stuff. There's a BMW alternator on this thing. Basically a fairly top spec Irish drift car. A lot of the stuff is actually made here in Budford, I suppose, so there's that as well. So a lot of my practice is actually on the simulator, so on the PC game called the Assetto Corsa. That's kind of where I started, I suppose. I would have picked up the gaming back in like, oh geez, before I was even 10 years old, probably 9 or 10 years old, like Need for Speed and all of that stuff. Nowadays, I suppose I do a lot of sim stuff. I'm an advocate for it, but also, you know, I'm a nerd, so I'm still playing the shit like, you know, for 14 plus years. So I still love it, even to this very day, yeah. How I look at the sim world is that it's basically a video game that we take to an extreme level of trying to get it as close as possible to reality. It opens up the spectrum a bit because it allows anyone to get into it and allows you to train as much as you want. The championship I've won, like 2019 was the virtual drift championship, which would be considered the highest level championship. It's hardest to get in there. You have to win quite a few events. I've won that twice, so in 2019 and in 2021. To be fair, they're not exclusively called World Drift Series or World Drift Championship, but there's so many different nationalities competing in it. It's easier just to turn around and say, yeah. It's just cooler, I guess, to turn around and say, oh yeah, I have a 4-time World Esports Drift Championship. But like, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm just a gaming nerd who sits in front of a computer, you know, and just steers left and right. And it's cool to me, so I think that's all that matters. The wheelbase is a SimiCube 2 Pro. Worked with SimiCube now for the past 2 years. Their equipment is fantastic and it's definitely the best in the market. I've got some nice inverted Simagic pedals, and then we've got a AliExpress special handbrake that I've modified, and then we've got like a Trustmaster shifter, but the rig itself was made by my dad when I was 12 years old. So it doesn't fit me perfectly, but I mean, it's not that bad. So I think the next upgrade for me is definitely a proper rig. Get something a bit more compact, a bit more comfortable for me. And then yeah, just a single 27-inch monitor. It's controversial in itself, but anyway, it works best for me. So I've been doing it for that way over 20 years, so I'm going to continue doing it that way. IDC now, I suppose, to me, I think it's more of a feeding ground for European drift competition, I feel like. 7 or 8 years ago, maybe even less than that, IDC was actually the pinnacle of European drifting. You could even argue that, and it was higher than most other national championships. I guess you could put that down thanks to maybe like Dave Egan and that crew of Drift Games for pioneering that. But also I think the drivers around that time were very fortunate that they had an organisational level and I suppose a judging crew that were very dedicated and were always pushing the boundaries of the sport. Because even though we have so many great drivers in Ireland, like, you know, like James Dean, the Shanahan brothers, Dwayne McKeever, like Tomas Kiley, there's been a lot of people before that too that have also taken that flag, and not that they haven't gone unnoticed, but like even during those times we were still, as a nation, one of the best, if not the best at that time. I don't think it's anything to do with us drifting in fields. I don't think it's anything to do with the fact that we're into rally or anything like that. I do think there is a part of it. We love sport and we love, you know, being the best in ourselves as Irish people. But I also think too that worked on an organisational level that, you know, we've had the same drifting judge for over 20 years. And there's other organisations that are doing now that drift judge ruled out that didn't work 15 years ago. So there's people making mistakes now that we don't make anymore as a drift organisation or as a drifting sport. community because we know that it doesn't work or it's not fair or whatever. We're very lucky as a country that we have a drift organisation that is willing to come back every single year, give us track layouts that are really hard to compete on, which pushes us as drivers, come back with regulations that are open enough to the point of where we can have flexibility. I think we're lucky. I think we have a lot of things on our side, and I think that's probably why we're one of the best in the world. But I also think too, Irish people are very proud of the people that lead us, I guess, that we follow. And it's quite interesting to think that, like, even though we're competitors, we as a nation are very much together when it comes to supporting our own across the pond. I started competing in 2015. In 2017, I got my pro amateur license for IDC. And then at the end of 2017, I got my pro license. This season's probably my best in a very long time. Up until COVID, I was definitely on like one of these kind of graphs, you know? Like, we were really progressing fairly fast. But after, you know, the things started to go downhill, reality hits, you know, like people move on and stuff like that. And I kind of blame myself for not putting the same amount of time into it that I did back then. I've learned a lot. But this year, even though I'm putting like, I'd say 60 or 70% more time and effort into it, I'm enjoying it a lot more because I'm getting the results that I want. And it's been a long time since I've been in that position, at least 5 years, and it feels great, put it that way. So the only thing that's changed in this car since last year is actually the physical looks of it. This year, I decided to go on my own with Team Hynes, or Hynes, which is my own brand, gaming brand, merchandise. It's just basically who I am, it's me. We decided to do something a bit different. We put an S13 front end on it, or 180SX, which a lot of people like, but it's definitely very different. I wanted to do that because I wanted to make it clear that, like, look, this is a change, we're changing. So that's the biggest difference for sure. Pro 2, I love it. I miss competing in the Pro 2 actually. I think it was so much more relaxed and stuff. I did it one year, I competed against Conor Shanahan, and we fought it out to the very end. But like in those days, Pro 2 was just as competitive as the Pro class. What I mean by that was that it was the same regulations, same tires and stuff, so it was like super expensive to compete in it. Nowadays, they've taken a step back. It's that like it's a lot more restricted. You have to use more of a normal based road tire. I want to say that it's definitely a better system than running semi-slicks and stuff. I think it opens up the funnel of people who can enter the sport, and it means that you can have a very low budget and still win events and stuff. There's a lot of great drivers coming up now, like a new generation of drivers. I think I would consider myself as a new generation maybe 5 years ago. And then when I was talking about earlier about that graph, that was me as a new generation driver. So with that in mind, there's new generation coming up and they're fighting for blood. Like, they're probably more competitive than what we were a couple of years ago. The understanding of how to build a car and stuff is much better. How to perform at a higher level is much better. It's at a point now where, like, for me to stay above, I need to do what they're doing plus more. So the Pro class, we can run a road tire if we want, but we won't be very competitive. So the tires that we run are basically designed for drifting. I guess like the misconception is that we're trying to make the cars as slippy as possible. But like, you know, you said earlier you saw my car three-wheeling. That's because it's got so much grip that it's trying to lift itself off the ground. That's the best way to put it, right? The tires that we use, they're not meant to for the road because one, they wouldn't last as long. They're not technically road legal, and if you were to probably drive them in the rain, you will probably crash because, you know, they're not made for like slippy conditions. They're made for dry conditions, I suppose. I don't know. It's quite interesting. We put as much grip as we can into these cars, and with that, then we use power to make sure we spin the wheels. So we're trying to make speed from a spinning tire. That's the best way to put it. I'm sure there's someone that has more science behind it, but I mean, I try to keep it simple for my own brain because if I don't, then I'd forget half the stuff myself or confuse myself. When I was a kid, like, you'd be lucky if there was like 40 people there at the event. So since then, I guess a lot of people back in those days had the dreams of what we have right now. Like, you know, tire sponsors, like lots of power, like the Group B era of, you know, drifting. And I think we're certainly in that era right now. But a lot has changed. And a lot has changed on the driving ability. A lot has changed on the organizational side of it. There's a lot has changed on the car side of it. And I think that's the biggest difference, is probably on the cars. The cars that we're using themselves, the models and makes, haven't changed. But what we do to them and the knowledge behind it, holy shit, a lot has changed. I'd say if you looked at the cars that we have now and if you were to bring it back, you know, 20 years ago, people are like, what are you at? You know, they think you'd be crazy trying to do what we're trying to do now. I don't even think we could dream of what we have right now. And I think that's kind of crazy to think when you look at it that way. I mean, I think we need this sport to live as long as possible. We don't get really recognised in Ireland for the sport, but I think with more time in it, we will. Like, I don't think rallying, you know, when it was first started in, I don't know, the 70s or 60s in Ireland, was on RTE News all the time when so-and-so won or when Billy Coleman won. But it is now when an Irish driver does really good in WRC. So maybe in 10 years' time, we will be on RTE News and all that stuff. I think that strive and that want for it, I think as long as that is there and as long as people support it and stuff like that, and as people come into the sport, I think we're on a good track. I think we'll keep pushing for as long as we can, and I think that's the most important thing. Like, since I started with a pro license, like every single pro year I finished in the top 3 in the championship, but I've never won a championship. So there's that element of like, yeah, I've been wanting it for years, and I have decided not to leave the country until I win one. So I might be still here for another 15 years trying to win a championship, but we'll get it eventually, I hope. Maybe this year.
So I'm here at 360 Motorsport Park with the winner of the final round of the IDC, and most importantly, the 2024 IDC champion. It must be crazy for you. Talk me through a few of the emotions you're feeling right now.
Yeah, look, it's on another world, don't get me wrong. You know, you never know what pressure is until it actually gets finally released from you, and you think you're putting it at the back of your head, but no, it's sitting there the whole time. And oh my God, it's like, I don't think there's another word to describe it. Like I said to someone else earlier, like, it's probably going to be the shittest interview you'll ever have. But what I will say is that I'm on cloud 9, and I think the driving tonight was fantastic. This season for me has been amazing. I can't ask for anything more.
And what was going through your head, lined up for one last time against Tomas Kiley?
Yeah, look, I know Tom for years, like, you know, and he's some really good battles with James Dean, you know, especially in the IDC era a couple of years ago, like, so I know what he's like, and the car is fantastic, and he's probably one of my favourite drivers to watch. But look, unfortunately, he had a mechanical failure. I would have loved to give him a proper chase. We gave him probably like an 8 out of 10, if not even the 7 out of 10 chase. And that was enough for us to cement it. But look, Tom is amazing, and he's worthy of a Drift Masters champion in himself. So what an amazing driver.
You never know, you could be battling him against him in Drift Masters next year.
Oh, well, you're putting words into my mouth there. I'd love to do more stuff in Europe next year. That's definitely the plan. That's my plan for years to do that. And I think now we have the foundation. We've cemented ourselves as like an IDC champion. That's what I wanted for so many years, and we've finally done it. So, you know, maybe it's time to make a step. You never know.
I'll leave you go celebrate with your team. Congratulations, man.
Cheers. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.